And we're starting off with Marvin Ellison. Marvin is the CEO of Lowe's, which is one of the top 10 companies in the United States. And very excited to have Marvin here. He's got a 30-year career in retailing. He had a long, successful career at Home Depot. He was at J.C. Penney most recently, and he's now he was CEO there. And he's now as I said, for the last 9 months, been the CEO of Lowe's. And you're going to get a chance to hear up close and personal from Marvin in our conversation. A little more on him besides his long and successful career in the retail industry is that he has a bachelor's degree in business from the University of Memphis, and we'll talk about where he grew up and how he grew up and why he ended up choosing that college. And then he went on to Emory, which is a fantastic college where I've actually spent some time speaking and recruiting myself, where he received his MBA. And also, just would point out, Marvin is on the board of directors of Federal Express, or FedEx, I guess is the term, and now we call it, and on the board of RELA, the Retail Industry Leaders Association, as well as NRF, National Retail Federation, and the board of trustees for the University of Memphis. He was named among Fortune's World's Greatest Leaders in 2016, and also received the 2016 Corporate Executive of the Year from Black Magazine. Let's welcome to the stage Marvin Ellison. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Great to be here.
Glad you're here. So let's just start off and talk about how did you get into the retail business? Where'd you grow up, and how to get started?
Well, I grew up in this little small town in western Tennessee called Brownsville, a two-stoplight town, 10,000 people. And what was ironic, I lived 12 miles in the country from the 10,000 people that made up the city. So I was really out in the little rural part, and middle child of 7. So
middle child of 7. Okay.
So I described it as a born peacemaker. You know, I had factions on both sides for my whole life. But I decided to go to school in Memphis because Memphis was the largest city and largest major university to my little small hometown. And a little known story, I was in the student council my freshman year, and we had our annual conference for the state at Memphis State University, which was the University of Memphis' name back then. And it was the first time I'd ever stepped foot on a college campus on a spring day. And I said to myself, I'm going to school here. And that's the level of detailed research that I did.
And not every, yeah, right. I got that picture. Yeah. I know how that worked.
And Terry, you and I talked a little bit, this morning. I mean, backgrounds are similar. I mean, my dad never graduated from high school. And my parents were just wonderful parents that taught my siblings and I really the foundation I think that you have to be successful, and that is the value of hard work, the importance of having the faith in religion, and how education could unlock all doors. And the one thing that I heard more often than not was never allow your surroundings to dictate your dreams. Because growing up in that little small town, having a family that didn't have a lot, it was easy to look around you and not see anything that looked like success. And so, just listening to those lessons from my parents really gave me the motivation to go out and try to do more than just be the next factory worker or working on the farm where a lot of my classmates, I always had a burning desire to do a little bit more.
And so you and I had a little bit of a conversation about this, but so conversations around the dinner table were not about, son, you're going to college, and which one do we want to go to? Well, that didn't exist, right? And among your siblings, you were one of two, was it, that went to college, or the second one went to college?
Yeah, my oldest sister went to the University of Tennessee, and as a family, we knew nothing about college. So I oftentimes tell her she was like Lewis and Clark. She went out into the wilderness without any real guideposts, but she was the adventurer to go figure out what does this college experience look like. And so she went out And I learned from her because, she taught me the do's and don'ts of that. But I, and I'm still really close to my siblings, and I talk to her on a weekly basis and get a lot of coaching, as you know, about how to run a retail business from a lot of my siblings.
Right, shoppers.
Yeah.
That's right, we get a lot of guidance.
That's the beauty of a big family. But yeah, you grow up. The thing that my parents, taught us and taught me specifically was that you couldn't make excuses, and that your ability to go out and just take on life's challenges and prepare yourself for the future would allow you to achieve anything you wanted, because in the segregated period that my parents grew up, and candidly, I was born in 1965, which for some of the students seems like a million years ago. I mean, I still grew up in really a segregated environment where there were a lot of limitations mentally to what you could actually believe you could do, but my parents just never allowed us to accept that, and they just challenged us that we had the ability to be whatever we wanted if we put the work in and understood that education was really the key to unlocking everything, because as my dad said to me on more than one occasion, the one thing that can never be taken from you is your education. And so that motivated me to go out and try. And like you, I mean, I worked my way through college. It took me 5.5 years to graduate, because I was working in some cases full time, trying to go to class and work classes around a full-time work schedule. But I wouldn't change anything, because it taught me to appreciate, the effort and all that went into trying to make that an accomplishment.
Yeah, and it's a good message for the students, because not everybody has the same set of deck of cards when they start out. It's not always fair to everybody. Some have obviously many more advantages. I've found at the University of Arizona there is a work ethic here of many students who are doing multiple things at the same time while they're going to college. And I think Marvin's an example that if you are determined, you can get through these hard times, and at the end of it, there's a lot of rewards and recognition that will come.
Absolutely.
So how'd you choose retail?
Well, again, I was really strategic in how I went about this. I went to the unemployment office at the University of Memphis, and I said to the clerk, "What's the highest paying hourly position you have posted on the board?" And she said, "I think there is a part-time job at Target that's paying $4.35 an hour." I said, "Please set me up for that interview." And that's my retail strategic process. So,
love it.
Literally. And so I go in, I interview, and it was a store security officer job. And the reason why I chose it, because A, it was the highest paying job posted that day, and B, it gave me the flexibility to work around my school schedule. And I started out, it was just a part-time job. And 15 years later, I was the corporate director over asset protection for the company living in Minneapolis. Because what I was lucky and blessed that I joined a company that was just starting its growth trajectory. And I joined a company that valued people development and valued anyone that had intellectual curiosity, because in going to work, I mean, I wanted to learn as much as I could, because I've just always been an intellectually curious person. And what I learned is the more that I understood about the business, the front end system, how receiving worked, how the price changes work, not only the better I got at my job, but the more interesting my job became. And I was just fortunate, and that's how I ended up at Target. And again, 15 years, I graduated from college. I think I started there my junior year, worked there for 2 years, graduated, and just kind of continued to stay there. And the first 15 years of my retail career was at a great company, which is something that really set my foundation.
And from Target, was that then to a Home Depot?
To Home Depot, yeah. Look, my wife and I, we grew up in the South, and in retail, Terry, you move a lot. And so we had moved quite a bit, but that last move from Memphis to Minneapolis in February, That was the move. No, I take it back. That was the first move to Minneapolis. The last move was from Orlando, Florida to Minneapolis in February. That was the one that my wife looked at me and said, the clock is ticking on you. And so we went up, and I was there and had an opportunity to join Home Depot. And for the students in here, and for some of the what I would call executives that are still transitioning through your career, what's important for you to know is that in my entire professional career, I can count 10 promotions that I did not get, that I was passed over for. 10. And one of the reasons why I left Target to go to Home Depot was because there was a VP opening that I was one of a couple people who was considered, and I didn't get it. And so it put me in a position where I had to either change positions, change functions, or look for a different company. And I was very fortunate and blessed that Home Depot had an opportunity in my field, and I transitioned. But again, I can count 10 times that there were promotions that I was in the running for and I didn't get. And in every one of those 10 occasions, I had to regroup, readjust, and determine what was next. And one of the reasons why I ended up at Home Depot was because of that.
And so this is a good, good, I think, education lesson for the group. That many times you think you got passed over, and you look back, was it the company, or was it something you weren't doing or weren't ready for, or what do you think it was?
Great question. And so I can think of one time in particular. I was working at Target, and I had a position that I was so interested in and had worked so hard to achieve, and I was passed over for it, and a good friend of mine was given it instead. And what I was told, and this is a great lesson learned, was told from one of the people involved in the assessment process. There was one senior vice president that was the determining factor that I did not get the job. And I was hurt, angry, frustrated, felt victimized, all the emotions you tend to get. But then I decided to do something different. I picked up the phone and I called him. And I said, look, I understand you played a role in this decision. I don't want to revisit that, but can I ask you a favor? Could you mentor me? Because what I understood is that maybe there was something that he saw that I couldn't see myself. Mm-hmm. And rather than being a victim, which I was going through all that emotion of, this is not my fault, maybe it was for this, maybe it was for that. Instead, I said, let me just kind of take a step back and maybe ask myself the question, maybe there is something about me in my leadership style or my preparedness that I need to work on. And I reached out to him, and to his credit, he agreed. And I spent a lot of time with him over the next 12 months. He was very generous with his time, and he taught me great lessons about things that were perceived about me that, in my opinion, were not true, but as the old saying goes, perception is reality.
Yes.
And so I worked, with him as a coach and a mentor for at least 12 months, and as fate would have it, about 2 years after that, there was another position that came available, significantly larger than the one that I had got passed on, and my greatest advocate for me getting that job was the same person that blocked me 2 years earlier. And I didn't have him as a mentor to try to politicize a friendship. It was more my eagerness of, can you give me something to read that's going to help develop me from a more of a strategic planning standpoint? Is there activities I need to be involved in? And I did the work. And what's so interesting is when I was promoted, or when I took this role as CEO of Lowe's, one of the first people who contacted me was him.
Wow. That's a great lesson, by the way, but a great lesson that you took the initiative, and as opposed to just blaming this person, in a positive way, confronted this person and said, how can I learn from this? I've always learned my own lessons. Kind of come back to this, is that particularly for you students, that I learned very early on in my career, that a lot of people leave a company because of their boss. Frankly, when you leave, it's frankly the number one reason why people leave a company is because of their
Absolutely.
boss. And I try to remind people that you're not going to have that boss forever. Number one. And number two, maybe the organization sees some of the flaws in your boss too. So if you're leaving, you should be really considering that you're leaving the company, but you're making your decision because of a moment in time and a boss. And I think
Absolutely.
the way you handled that, it sounds like the absolute right approach. Let's talk about Lowe. So you just got there 9 months ago, and what's happening? What's going on with Lowe's, and what do you see as the opportunities there?
Well, we have a lot going on. Lowe's is a terrific company. Did $71 billion in revenue, over $5 billion of free cash flow, over $5 billion of operating income. So just a great company, but a company that I would say started to make investments in the future without making investments in the present, if that makes any sense. And because in retail, even though we're in this omni-channel world that's never going away, and I think it's the most exciting time to be in retail, in certain segments of retail like home improvement, the vast majority of your transactions will always take place in your brick and mortar locations just based on the sheer nature of what you sell. You sell big, bulky products, and you sell products that require employee consultation. You want someone to show you how to do it. You want to make sure you understand the features and benefits. And so in our world, roughly 95% of our sales in 2018 happened in the brick and mortar locations. And so that tells you the power. And so one of the mistakes of the past management team was not allocating capital effectively for the core retail business. And so we coined something that we call retail fundamentals, and that's getting back to the basic fundamentals of retailing, and that is being in stock, product on the shelf, having great customer service, but also having technology that enables an environment with less friction for the customers to shop any way they choose, but that drives productivity for the associates. And so the company had gone through a period of roughly 7 years where they had fallen dramatically behind their chief competitor. And even though your strong balance sheet, fabulous financials, when you look at market share gain relative to the competition, you could tell that there was an opportunity to do better. And so one of the lessons learned from me coming in, Terry, and this was not easy, was making a lot of leadership changes. And I had talked to the board prior to taking the role that after assessing the company and understanding the industry, that I felt like we'd have to make some organizational changes and some really challenging leadership changes. And so within the first 4 months, we replaced the CFO, the head of merchandising, head of stores, head of supply chain, chief information officer, head of e-commerce. That's a lot of change. But something that I heard recently and it's not a play on words, but sometimes it's required in order to drive change management. Sometimes you have to change management, and so changing the leaders and bringing people in who had a depth of understanding of retail, but also that understood not only retailing one-on-one basics, but also the future of where retailing is going was important. And so we made a lot of changes. We've tried to get the company back refocused. We divested a lot of assets, a lot of businesses and investments that took the company away from the fundamental retail business. We walked away and either sold or closed those entities down so we can get solely focused on driving this business. And although it's just been less than a year, we're starting to see progress. We got a lot of work to do, but we have a really talented team, and you and I know that it's all about the people you can put around you, the quality, the talent, their ability to recruit additional talent, and we're starting to see that flywheel effect happen right now.
It's and you're 100% right. We are totally aligned on that. That you're only as good as your weakest link in your management team, and that shows very quickly in a large organization. So there's two pieces of change management. One is to recognize that you have to change the leadership. The other is who you replace them with, right? Because you've got to make sure that when you have that opportunity to put the right person in, that in fact it is the right person. How'd you go about that?
Well, I just have a fundamental belief that it starts with with quality individuals. I mean, because putting a collection of people together doesn't make them a team. It just makes them a group of executives, working together. Team is about having continuity, about collaborating well, about having a collegial, perspective. What I mean by that is you want people that are not concerned about how good they look, and it's all about the company and the function. And so I spent a lot of time, making sure that we brought in those right kinds of people. But part of what I had the luxury of doing was bringing in people that I worked with in the past. Not in every case, but in some of the more significant positions, going out and finding individuals, not only that I knew their work quality, but also I knew their character, I knew their work ethic, and I understood how they led and how they thought about serving customers. And so it's never easy to put, those many people together. It's never easy to make those level of changes that quickly, but I felt like it was imperative that we did. And one thing I'll share with everybody in the room, as one of the things that I tend to do when I join a new organization or I take over a new function, one of the first things I did the first couple of weeks, I pulled every senior vice president and above together in one room, just to have an introductory meeting. But little known to them, I gave them a pop quiz. I do this, I've done this before, and if they would have researched my background, they would have knew it was coming. And so, welcome, great to be here. Take out a sheet of paper, we're going to take a quiz. And so I gave them 5 questions to answer independently. And if you think this is something that your company is good at, I challenge you, your next staff meeting, try this. First question, what's the company's mission statement? Second question, what's the 3 corporate objectives to achieve the mission statement? Third question, what are the 3 key metrics we look at as a company to determine that we're achieving the expectations of our mission and our shareholders? Fourth question, what's our philanthropic focus as a company? And the last question, which is a bonus question, what's the purpose of the company? So, I'm not going to give you the results of that quiz, but I can tell you it wasn't very good. And the reason why I did it was to demonstrate to the team that just because you're working hard doesn't mean that you are aligned. Because when you're aligned, you're consistent on those really fundamental questions. If you don't know your philanthropic focus as a company, and you're a senior executive, how do you determine what you support and how you communicate while you're out in different events? And so it was just a way to demonstrate the need for alignment. And so from that, we redefined the mission statement, we redefined objectives, we became clear on financial metrics to the point where now, for the first time in the history of the company, bonus payout for the CEO is identical to the store manager, the same 3 metrics. Never done that before, but that's one way to drive alignment. And so it's those kinds of things that I wanted to do, because I oftentimes believe, Terry, that we overcomplicate things. Just because businesses are big and they're complex just by the nature of their size, doesn't mean that the strategies have to be complicated, or you have to have so much ambiguity around what you're doing that no one can on any given day tell you these are the 3 most important objectives, this is the mission. And so simplicity for me has always been one of my hallmarks, because I think it drives efficiency and it drives clarity of purpose. But you don't know where you're going, as the old saying goes. Any road will take you there. And so I'm a big believer in just making sure we have clarity of vision and purpose.
I love it, and I love the simplicity of it, and I love the clarity that you've defined. So now, how do you communicate your objectives, your priorities to the broader organization at Lowe's?
Well, something that I do, and if there are any CEOs in the room or leaders of big function, is something that has worked well for me. Every week I do a video podcast to the whole organization. It's 5 minutes or less. It's not high production, it's just one camera, me talking in it. I'll talk to the associates, we call our employees associates. Where I've been this week, I've visited these markets, we talk about, hey, this is what's happening in the company. These are some of the most interesting kind of news-related items that are out there this week that impact us. And I just reinforce the message around what we're trying to get accomplished. It's not scripted. It's directly to the associates. We send it around the world to our associates in India, our buying offices in Asia, every distribution center, every call center, every store, and I just reinforce those messages on a weekly basis in a very direct and on a very authentic way. I answer questions that people submit to me via email. I publish my email to the entire company with 310,000 employees. Then trust me, I stay busy answering associate emails. I answer them all myself. I don't delegate it. All associate emails come to me. I answer them myself. I may forward them to someone for a more technical response, but they always hear back from me. And that's just a way of being transparent.
Very good.
And being accessible, but also making sure that there's no better person to reinforce the message than the CEO. And I learned that from just growing up, in the business, and sometimes feeling as a executive that's a manager, director, just kind of feeling so disconnected to what the company is doing and who these individuals are leading the company. And one of the ways I wanted to close that gap was to just try to leverage modern technology to try to create more of a connection with everyone.
And I think it's so important because, and again, when you run a big company like you're running, to have you have a personal feel like there's a personal connection with the 310,000 is a huge advantage when you can accomplish that. And accomplishing it the way that you're doing it electronically, and whether it be email responses or a podcast, I think it helps make this a big giant company feel like sort of like I always like to say, a family run business with a name and a face attached to the top slot.
Absolutely right.
So talk about the customer at Lowe's. I don't know this for sure, but it's my memory that Lowe's has actually more female customers than Home Depot, and that's been a purposeful mission. Is that part of the strategy, part of the objective?
Yeah, I mean, Lowe's has historically, had a more of a natural female base because the stores have been more what we call decor oriented, garden, kitchen, bath, more on the interior decoration side of the home improvement kind of portion of the business. But at a high level, Lowe's has three types of customers. We have what we call do-it-yourself customers, both male and female, that want to come in and buy products and learn how to do it themselves, whether it's something as simple as painting a room or something as complex of trying to build a deck. And what we try to do is not only sell you the product, but also have individuals that work for us that have the skill level that can kind of walk you through, here's how you do it. So that is the largest portion of our business, the do-it-yourself customer. The next portion is what I call the do-it-for-me customer. That's that customer whose idea of a home improvement project is writing a check or using a credit card because you're time-starved, or you simply don't want to go into something complex that you're trying to do yourself. So if you want to get a kitchen remodel or you're remodeling a bathroom, you definitely don't want to take that on unless you are very handy and skilled, and that's the do-it-for-me, and we'll assign you a contractor and we'll help scope that out and do that work for you. And then there's a segment we call the professional customer. That's the customer that leverages Lowe's as a supply house, that they buy their building materials, lumber, roofing, drywall, et cetera, from us as part of supporting their small or large business. And for us, we have probably lost share in the last 10 years in that professional segment. And that's important because that customer is about 5.5 times more valuable in spend than any of the other two segments because of the sheer frequency of how often they come in. We have certain pro customers, believe it or not, that shop us over 200 times a year.
Wow.
So think about it now, you open basically 363 days, and they're in your store 200 plus days of that because they're literally using the company as a supply house. And so those customers are really valuable because they drive transactions, number of visits, they drive average ticket, the average amount of each transaction, and it helps lift the entire store. And so as Lowe's in the last 10 years has lost share with that customer, it has had a compounding impact on just the overall productivity of a physical store. And so our strategy is simple. We want to improve the do-it-for-me and do-it-yourself customers, and a lot of that has to do with having better connection via digital and physical with the whole omni-channel initiatives we're working on, but also create an environment that those pro customers feel like they can come and shop and they can have the quantities of product they need, they can have the brands they want, and the level of service. And so our strategy is not to focus on one or the other, but to focus on all three, but the emphasis is on gaining share back in the pro.
I'm going to open up to questions in a minute, so I'll have our students be ready with microphones to run that assist. But before we do, my former company had a localization strategy called My Macy's.
Absolutely.
We tried to have assortments that reflected the local communities.
Yeah.
So does Lowe's have different assortments of product in Orlando versus Minneapolis, as an example?
So Terry's being modest. Macy's was the first large company to have a national initiative on localization that I remember working at Home Depot that we studied because it was so effective. And that is, as Terry would tell you, that is not easy to do, especially back then when you didn't have access to the type of data analysis that you have today. That is something, Terry, that is one of the other kind of retail fundamental things that the company walked away from, primarily because a decision was made that it was easier to manage a more consistent allocation of product.
It is easier.
Absolutely.
It's not very effective.
That's right.
But it's easier to manage.
Easier for the company, not effective, because you said it earlier, when the customers walk into a store, you want them to feel as though it is their local store. And even more so in the environment where it is a privilege in this omni-digital world for a customer to physically walk in a store. If they physically walk in, you want to make sure that store is assorted. One of the great attributes of e-commerce and digital commerce is because everything is localized. Because when you sort color, size, you are in essence localizing your assortment digitally, and now you want to see the same thing in the physical world. And so Lowe's walked away from that, and I remember, one of the first things I did is I wanted to visit all 15 geographic regions in the first 6 weeks. And oftentimes when you make a commitment like that, you ask yourself, why did I make that commitment? But it was important.
Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, exactly. But as I went out and I took on that commitment, it was just really eye-opening to me, and I'll never forget being in Bullhead City, Arizona. Okay, so some of you have been there. It's an interesting location because it's right across from Nevada. And I remember going to the store unannounced and walking in, and they had just built this end cap, and that is kind of at the end of the aisle. And I asked the store manager, why do we have deck stain in Arizona? And he said, because that's the planogram. I said, there are no decks in Arizona. It is all concrete. He said, I know that, but that's the planogram.
It's your problem, CEO. I'm following your instructions.
That's exactly right. And then as I continued my traveling odyssey, I ended up in Manhattan, and I go to one of our stores that was really struggling, and I walk into the bath area, and the first thing I see is this magnificent big tub for the bathroom. And I said to the store manager, the store's been open a little over 2 years, I said, let me tell you how intuitive I am and how I can just read data. I can guess your exact sales on this item in 2 years. It is 0. And he said, how did you know? I said, because nobody can fit this in their apartment in Manhattan.
That's right. You can't even get it up the elevator, right?
Exactly. But that tells you some of the obvious things and mistakes that we made. And so we're taking a step back. We've established a field merchandising team that is kind of the first level of going out and understanding the local markets, understanding the needs of the local market, and now we're adjusting the assortment and the planograms. This is just, as you know, this is retail one-on-one, but sometimes you can get so focused on innovation. As a classic example, they couldn't wait to show me the virtual reality headsets that we were piloting so that a customer could put these on and visualize their new kitchen and their new flooring in their home, through virtual reality. That was great, but my question was, can we even take payment in the home? And the answer was no. So think about that for a second now.
Yeah.
We had worked on virtual reality to visualize the future of your remodel when it was done, but if the customer wanted to pay with a credit card, our technology at the time was so limited, we couldn't even take payment in the home. That is what I call serving icing without a cake. And so now we're focused back on let's make the cake, let's get the fundamentals right. All the innovative, really cool and sexy things that we want to do to be cutting edge is important. We'll get there, but you can't get there if you're not running the basics of the business well. And we're just trying to get things reprioritized.
Well said. All right, questions, and you got to wave your hands so we can let us know where you are.
I have a question up here.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for that. Really appreciate the presentation. In terms of losing share amongst these folks that are professional customers, can you walk me through, first of all, how you lost share within that segment, and then what sort of tactics you're implementing to regain share amongst that segment?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, the company made merchandising decisions to walk away from certain national brands because they felt they could get higher margin percent in private brands. The problem is most contractors are very brand loyal, and so they're not going to switch to a private brand. That was one. The other thing is when you talk about a professional customer, the thing that you hear them say over and over again is time is money. And time is money, meaning you have to have a focus on the service. And these things are going to be really basic. As an example, a pro customer will come in and shop on Monday, and they will look at the visual presentation of your product, lumber, building materials, et cetera. If they don't see adequate quantities on the shelf, they will not come back the rest of the week, because their expectation is if you're running such a low stock level on Monday, you'll be out of stock on Wednesday. I'm not going to risk leaving the job site, driving here, and you being out of stock. We were thinking in terms of just-in-time inventory, not understanding that every customer is different. For that pro customer, they don't want just-in-time inventory. They want visual presentation that gives them confidence you're going to have it. And so adjusting inventory levels. And then the other thing is just the level of service. One of the main things I heard when I ran this business for our competitor years ago is that one of the key distinguishing factors between what stores they would shop would be as simple as, do you have a person dedicated to load my truck when I pull up? Because that's the difference between me leaving my job site by myself or leaving the job site with someone on my staff, which hurts my productivity. And we didn't understand that real simple nuance. And so just putting something as simple as a dedicated loader out front so the customers know whenever they pull up, the superintendent can be by him or herself, and there will be somebody to help them load. And so just getting back to the basic fundamentals, and now that we've gotten kind of like step one, we're working on things like more frequent, more efficient same-day delivery. We're working on things like credit terms, and that's kind of the next iteration, but it's all of those very basic things.
Okay.
Hi, Marvin. How are you? In one of the interviews you gave to the Wall Street Journal, you had said you're going to replicate a few areas of the Home Depot playbook where you can. And you also said, quote unquote, if you can't beat them, copy them. So my question is, do you feel like the Home Depot playbook is a success for Lowe's, or do you feel like there is some uniqueness to Lowe's that Home Depot does not have?
I guess I would say the first part with that, and I'm sure Terry will attest to this, never believe everything you read. This is number one. And that's also number two. But number three is like any company. I work for Target, Home Depot, and had the privilege of being the chairman and CEO at J.C. Penney. And what I will tell you is, in every stop along the way, I learned critical lessons about things that great retailers do consistently. And so there is no copying of the playbook from Home Depot or Target. It's more about looking at great retail best practices, whether those best practices are coming from Costco or Walmart or Best Buy or Home Depot. You know, it is taking just fundamentals of great product is king, having simple and obvious pricing so you can show value, being staffed, being courteous, having great service levels. So it's more about taking great retail practices and implementing those great retail practices. And it's also about learning from mistakes made of things you tried and things that fail and not replicating those things. What I know quite clearly is that no one can be effective at trying to copy someone, because you're just going to be a lesser imitation of who you're copying. It's all about understanding your customer, understanding your market's place, and understanding how you can be more effective than whomever you're competing against. And oftentimes that's simply by just looking very broad. One of the things I do every year is I take a trip and visit other retailers around the world, just to try to see if there's something different and unique going on in Europe, in Asia, that I can learn from, that my team can learn from. And so it's really about the best practice of retail versus just looking at one competitor or one former company.
We have a question here.
Hi.
Over here. Okay.
I'm Lexi Hutto from Millersville University in Pennsylvania, and I actually grew up in the home industry. My dad was one of the pioneers of it. But anyway, that aside, Lowe's has always been known, or for several years, as doing excellent marketing research. Can you tell us what some of your marketing research initiatives are currently? Thank you.
I would say that it's important to do the research, but it's also important to take the learnings from the research and implement them effectively. And I would say one of the main things that we learned is with our past marketing campaign and our tagline and just the way we were going to market, although it was memorable and it was catchy, it didn't drive action, and it didn't drive urgency of customers to go and shop. It was a little bit more whimsical and comical than get off the couch, log in, buy, get off the couch, drive to the store. And so our customers said, we like it, we think it's cute, but it really doesn't inspire me to get up and go buy anything. And so from that, we made some shifts and some changes, and we've also looked at where we market. We just signed an agreement to be the exclusive home improvement sponsor of the National Football League, and that was primarily driven by the fact that our customers overwhelmingly said, if you're going to be involved in any sports entity, that we would much prefer the NFL over NASCAR, over college football, and that is male and female customers both said that. And so it's about listening. Oftentimes, you do focus groups, you do a lot of deep analytics, and then when you ask the question, what actions are you taking from the data? Sometimes you're surprised that there's not a lot of action, because when the data tells the management team something other than what they want to hear, oftentimes the management team will just turn a deaf ear to it. And I'm of the belief that the customer's always right. And you listen to the customer and you respond appropriately, and that's what we're trying to do.
Marvin, good spending time with you. We're out of time, but enjoyed the conversation.
Great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.